What's going on, people? Welcome to a very special edition of the Keep It Certi podcast. And today we are joined by some truly incredible guests from FED, or the Foundation of Education Development. How are we today? We all okay? Good stuff. So lovely to see you all. Good. Good. So I know, Van, you were saying before the podcast you start that you have to shoot off soon, so I won't keep you waiting. But I'll let you start for the time being.
I'm going to leave if that's all right, and say best of luck to everyone. Really looking forward to hearing the podcast when it's completed.
No worries. But thank you for joining. Have a good holiday, okay? Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Oh, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I know, like, recently was a massive heat wave, wasn't it? But how did you all cope during the recent heat wave? Were you all okay?
I was working.
Were you?
Yeah, and I think the government released like a caution for schools to like do half school, but it was just a bit silly because the peak of the day is when they were sending students home. So yeah, when the sun was at its hottest was when they were sending children home. So I don't know how productive that was, but it was sweltering. Thank God for the trains that had aircon.
Oh my God! I had to count a couple of trains myself because of how hot it was, but I couldn't think about how hot it would be when it was 40 a few weeks ago, let alone a normal day.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was working on for this whole summer. I've been working up and down the country doing workshops. So I remember the hottest day of the year. I was in a field. Usually I'm in a field anyway doing the sessions, but I was in a field, and I remember the young people were like, "Oh, it's so hot," and this and the other. And I was there in a sweatshirt because that's what my work attire is. Well, I had a t-shirt as well, but it didn't get washed in time for me to put it in my suitcase and travel. So I had to wear a sweatshirt. And I was just looking at the young people like, I'm here. Like, you just have to listen to me. I have to deliver 5-6 hours worth of content in heat, yeah, with a sweatshirt on. But we just crack on. I like hot weather more than like snow and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what? Don't hate the player, hate the game. I'm just gonna get on with it.
Yeah, but I do not envy you at all with this sweatshirt as well, though. Wow. I mean, what kind of work were you doing with the young kids?
So we were doing one of the companies I freelance for is a company called Loudspeaker. Shout out to them. And we deliver public speaking workshops for the young people. Mm-hmm. And these were for young people that were on the NCS program, which is why we were in fields. So yeah, that's what we were doing.
Fair enough. And you've been doing it and you seem to do that whole summer as well, were you?
Yeah. So a lot of the facilitators had like 15 plus. Some people had sessions nearly every day. Some people had 11-hour workshops, to be fair. The longest I had was 6 or 7 hours. So they had it way tougher than me. But yeah, so throughout like the whole of summer, I was doing sessions with them, sometimes 4 times a week. Some people had 5 times a week. But yeah, it was really fun to do.
Wow, you must have lost so much weight though, doing all that though.
Yeah. That's why I've just been doing nothing for the last week.
I don't blame you.
Next week is when I got to start again. So yeah.
Oh, good luck with it all. How was everyone's summer though in general though? Was it all okay?
I think it's definitely been interesting, especially now that this is my first summer out of uni. And with regards to the heat specifically, I'm glad because I am a full-time wheelchair user, and part of my condition means I have very poor temperature control and very rash reactions to small temperature changes. And even in school, I used to struggle when it became warm, when it became what I considered warm then, but now as it's getting warmer and warmer every summer, and thankfully my times as I've been going up have been getting shorter due to how my university works. I could not imagine being in a school trying to do my A-levels or trying to do my GCSEs with the kind of condition that I have and with the support that I know I wouldn't get. So it's not been fun, but equally I recognize that with the way my life works now, I'm still in an incredibly lucky position.
I mean, you just mentioned there about even small changes are quite difficult for you. I mean, how did you cope personally, being a wheelchair user as well, with such drastic changes in the weather?
So a lot of napping because quite frankly, I was exhausted all the time, and I don't think I turned like my fan after 3 straight days. It was definitely interesting. I think as well, one of the things that really gets me is that I start to just not be able to think straight, as in not be able to engage in conversation purely out of the level of that fatigue. And I appreciate that everybody has their own kind of baseline for their fatigue, and a lot of people, they, you know, I saw a TikTok and it said that a woman, she always tries to, you know, at least shower before bed, even if she's exhausted. And I don't think a lot of teachers, certainly when I was in school, understood that when I say I'm exhausted, it means I can barely form a sentence anymore. And I think that's kind of what I feel, although it's terrible that I still go through it every summer. I recognize that if I was doing that while trying to, you know, excel in school, it wouldn't have worked.
I mean, how was it for you, Sorcery, as well during the summer? Was it okay?
Yeah, I've actually been working from home abroad. I'm in France at the moment.
Really?
So yeah, it's very hot here as well, but it's a nice kind of hot because it's Mediterranean heat and not horrible London concrete heat. So no, I have been enjoying myself. I've been working very hard as well.
I'm so glad to hear, though. And yourself, Diamond, how'd you get on? Were you okay?
How was I? Yeah, I was cool. I've just been chilling for most of the summer because obviously I'm off from work. So, you know, I've literally been living my life, went to Kew Garden. I've a lot of
Lovely.
relaxing, meeting up with some friends. So I really made sure I gave myself an actual break and didn't do anything too vigorous because I'm literally going back to work next week. Teardrops, but it's fine. So
Brilliant.
yeah, that's been
Lovely. And yourself, Sean, how'd you get on?
Yeah, it's been a fun summer. Like I went abroad for a couple of weeks in July to August, so that was fun.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was good. Like a nice 2 week sort of like a bit of work, bit of holiday. Went camping a weekend. That was fun. Yeah, went to a festival. Got another festival coming this weekend. So yeah, it's been a good summer. I've done quite a lot of things. So
Oh, glad to hear. I'm really glad to hear. But something that I love to ask all my guests every episode, whether it's my other podcast or this one in particular, is how people have coped during the whole lockdown situation. I know that things are getting better now. We can go out a lot more now, which is so amazing. But even so, how did you guys cope during the whole lockdown situation? Were you okay? And are you getting better? How did you cope? Let's start with Sean, actually, going backwards now. How did you find the whole lockdown situation? Are you okay?
yeah, sorry if it's a bit loud. I'm just gonna quickly shut the window.
That's okay.
I'll be back in 2 seconds.
No worries. I'll come back to you after then. So, Diamond, how did you find the whole lockdown situation? Were you okay?
I'm gonna be so honest. I think I thrived in COVID. I'm not gonna lie. It was actually one of the highlights of my life so far. Obviously, it wasn't nice that it got shut down. The schools got shut down, everything like that. But when initially the UK went into lockdown, what was quite shocking is obviously the schools got prepared. So I was working from home and trying to kind of accommodate this whole, you know, online classes and stuff like that. It just didn't work. And so I used the time instead to kind of build myself and build my capacity and, you know, kind of do self-development. And it worked wonderfully. I enhanced so many skills. I started doing music reading workshops, learning about music, some coding. Yeah, and I feel like I literally opened up. I learned so much more about myself. And I just realized the power of actually being able to learn about yourself and be given a downtime. So that's why in this summer holiday, I really try to appreciate the time that I had off and use it to build myself, my character, my resilience, my integrity, and my understanding of myself, what I like, what I don't like, and any interest I want to pursue, really. So yeah, I actually really enjoyed the time. Obviously, like I said, it wasn't a great time, but in light of what I learned and how I came out of it, I feel like it was really good.
Honestly, that's amazing, because I love to hear how you kind of worked on yourself as well and got out of it with a positive mindset. I mean, for a lot of people, that was the same sort of thing, wasn't it? Where they finally were able to take a step back and then find out who they really are as well, and focus on the things that were really important and weren't important, took it from there. I mean, how about you, Penelope? How did you find it? Were you okay?
I think as well, if I'm talking about it too much, please tell me to be quiet. But I think as well, I have a unique perspective on this as a disabled woman. For me, I've been disabled since I was about 3 seconds old. I won't get into how it happened because that's not relevant. But essentially, my entire living memory, I've been disabled, and inherent to that, obviously, or perhaps not so to you. I don't mean to, but anyway, there is a level of isolation that I don't think many non-disabled people have experienced before. And what was interesting to me is I spent my entire early childhood not being able to do anything by myself. I purely because of how little my doctors actually cared to research or ask me about my condition. So I didn't have the correct wheelchair, meaning I couldn't go to the toilet by myself. I couldn't leave my house. I couldn't go to a play group. I couldn't do anything, purely because I had the wrong equipment. So because of that, I spent pretty much the first 5-6 years of my life barely leaving my house. And if so, somebody was always with me, because it had to be. I couldn't even kind of go and sit in a circle and play with toys without my mum being 3 meters away, because in case I needed to go to the toilet, she needed to be there. All of those kind of things. And I feel like for the first time in a while, and I'm not the first disabled person to say this, I believe the first person that I heard saying this was Laramani. Amani Barbara, sorry. Shout out to her, she's absolutely amazing. I don't know her, but I love her so much. She mentioned something on a TikTok that she made, or maybe an Instagram video, that lockdown is really the first kind of taste that non-disabled people have had of any sort of disability. Of course, obviously, I'm talking disability in the broad sense, as in anybody can become disabled at any time. Of course, accidents happen, but more so in the broad sense of when society chooses to and governments choose to, they can take things away from you. They can make you isolated if it's necessary. And of course it was. And I feel like that was the first real sense that a lot of people had of enforced isolation, enforced physical isolation. And I felt that it was interesting to see, because I was habituated to it. And of course I did not thrive as much as Diamond. I don't think anybody could. She should be very proud of herself. But I was fine. I was getting my work done, and I was kind of doing everything that I should have been doing at the time. I was in my first year of my A-levels. But it was interesting to see how so many people had this sense of anger. And of course I understand, it was a difficult thing to get used to. But what I found is that these same people who had this kind of anger at a step that was reasonably taken by a government for safety, did not have the same anger when a disabled person told them that they spent their entire life like this. They did not share that, unless they did not empathize with that even after they had experienced it themselves. And I thought it was really illuminating that as a society we tend to ignore. We of course have a tendency to ignore things that kind of things that happen until they directly affect us. And even once they directly affect us, we focus solely on that. And while of course I appreciate that everybody's an individual, but what I really saw then, and what's guided me into how I try and do my activism work now, is the importance of community is something that's not acknowledged, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast today, is because community is something that has always been lacking. It can always be improved upon. And I feel like community is the only way we learn from each other, because we live in a society now where we see everything via social media. We see everything in little snippets. We don't really go in depth in conversation with different opinions. And I feel like lockdown did really illuminate that for me.
Because those are two very important subjects I want to talk about later on, actually, about social media and community, which we'll get to in a bit, actually, which I hope you don't mind, guys. But I'm just glad you both are okay at the moment. And we'll come back to you in a minute, actually. But Jonas, how do you find lockdown? Were you okay?
Yeah, I can't lie, because I'm an only child, and I think at that point, I was at that point in my life, I was 18, and I just started making changes in my life, because in school, I didn't like what happened to me in school. I didn't really enjoy school. So I was really trying to be the best man I can be. Well, young man or man that I can be, just the best person I can be, and develop myself. So that's when I began my public speaking journey and entrepreneurship journey and all that stuff. And I was doing an apprenticeship in a school, and lockdown hit. And it was actually the day before I was meant to return to my secondary school and do a speech, which irritated me, because ever since I left school on the last day of GCSEs, I said to everybody, or my friends, I said, I'm gonna come back next time I'm back here. I'm gonna chat. I'm gonna do my thing next time I'm here. And it was just happened only like less than 2 years after I got invited back. And I think when that happened, I was like, you know, it is what it is. I just started a podcast during lockdown. The day after lockdown was announced, I started a podcast and released it, like day one of lockdown. And also I generally just started, to be honest, working, couldn't do many speeches and workshops, but caught up on some movies, because when I was 17, 16, I was that, you know, that hustle culture thing where you just work. I fell into that because when I was in school, I was very lazy. So I did the opposite and overworked. So then I was like, let me catch up with some movies, watch some TV shows, all that kind of stuff. And I was also the guy that would be like, oh, I don't need nobody. I'm not lonely. Everybody's saying they're lonely. I don't need nobody. I'm cool. I was learning how to cook food. I was going in the shops with my gloves. I was very scared of coronavirus as well, by the way. Like, I put myself in lockdown 2 weeks before the government put us in lockdown. So I was very, very scared of it. Like, I was using hand sanitizer way too much as well. And also I was a key worker. So I was going in, working once a week, sometimes twice as well, but getting free food. So I wasn't complaining, but not gonna lie, towards the end of lockdown, I started to get a bit lonely. And my friends are gonna be watching this like, oh, Jonas, you never told us that, mate. I know they're gonna bring that up next time I see them, but yeah, I was lonely. But I think after that, I started to really realize that I can't be a lone wolf. And in life, to be successful, it's all well and good being independent, but also you need to know when to be interdependent. And I learned that during that period. And yeah, so that's how lockdown was for me. It was up and down, but look, I'm not gonna lie, it was the time of my life as well. I enjoyed catching up on things and not working as much as I used to.
But you know what? I love, from everyone so far, I really love that honesty as well, because I think, especially with guys as well, that there's this kind of stigma, isn't it, that you can't say what you're feeling, like your emotions and so forth. But for you to just come out as an 18-year-old or young guy, I was lonely during lockdown, or you know, you're a bit older now, obviously, but for you to say that during lockdown towards the end I was lonely, I think for me personally, that's a really brave thing to say, because for me, I'm a very introverted person. I found talking to people really difficult. Yet when I started my podcast, it really brought me out of my shell to talk with people. I mean, was that a similar situation to you as well, where when you started your podcast, it kind of helped you with your public speaking skills and your overall kind of way of approaching people?
Yeah, it did, because I was literally, when I was in school, I was that guy that if a teacher said something to me, I'd always have something to say back, because to me, it's like one of my main values in life is respect. You should always respect other people, no matter who they are, what their job is, what their life's like. Unless they're a really bad person, you should respect everybody, in my opinion. So when I was in school, and this is something I don't agree with, there are many things I agree with the school system, and many things I disagree with as well. So with this, I don't like the way that they treat children sometimes, like shouting at a 12, 11-year-old. I don't think that's healthy. especially when you're supposed to be looking after them. And for me personally, they'd shout at me. And when I was in year 7, 8, I'd cry. But then I got to year 9, 10, and 11. I just start shout. I just like raise. I just like level up and just raise my voice back. Because like, what's the point of shouting at me? I'm not gonna understand what you're saying when you're being emotional. It's gonna make me emotional as a child because I am a child. So I think that got me to the point where I got older and I said, I need to stop doing that. So then, because I stopped doing it, I kind of stopped talking and being assertive and everything. I kind of just let things happen because I didn't want to come across as the aggressive or the angry black man. Like, I still don't to this day, but now I know how to be assertive and when not to have a battle with somebody. And I think that during that period, it really did help me to be more confident approaching people, because I DM people with like 20K followers. I had like 200 followers back then. I DM people with 20, 25K followers, even celebrities, and I DM them even if they didn't even know who I was. Like, my content was rubbish back then as well. And people would say yes, some people would say no, but it got me comfortable with literally going up to people and saying, hey, can you come on my podcast? Because at that point too, when I was 17, I used to go to networking events in central London by myself and do pitches for my business and everything like that. But that I got comfortable with, but actually messaging someone online randomly, I hadn't got comfortable with. But now I do it randomly. I send random people emails about opportunities all the time. But that's what built it. And then me talking to people and learning about people's story allowed me to learn new things, learn new perspectives, and also just become more comfortable having a conversation with people, because I was somebody like you, was quite introverted when I was younger because I got bullied a lot. Didn't really trust a lot of people because of how I grew up and everything. But nowadays, look, I'm not gonna lie, I don't trust everybody. Like, that's how you should be in life, to be honest. You can't trust everybody, but I'm much more trusting of people and much more loving of people as well, because of things like the podcast and the people I've been able to surround myself for the last 3-4 years of my life, which I'm extremely grateful for.
That is amazing and very inspirational as well. I really admire that. And I know we only got hang on much left of this actual link here, so come to social quickly as well. Could you put a hand up? Diamond, sorry, as well. So Diamond, you put your hand up about something.
Yes, I put my hand up quickly in regards to what Jonas was saying about the teachers that are shouting. And I think that something I recognized whilst being in the school is, teachers are there for the passion to teach, not for behavioral management. And I think that in the lockdown period specifically, parents learned a fantastic lesson about what their teachers go through in order to teach their kids. And after that, I know there was a lot of parents that came up with a new appreciation and new recognition for what teachers do and have to face on a regular basis when they had to be at home with their own kids for a long duration of time. So I just found that quite funny. I wanted to chip in for a bit to say that, look, obviously the teachers, maybe they don't manage things very well, but the parents definitely learn a good lesson or two and recognize, hey, my child's not as easy as I thought to deal with, and facilitating their learning, the learning that will impact them for life. If you teach a child 1 + 1 is 2, they're taking that with them to their grave. So being able to impact the child's learning on that level, whilst in lockdown, I think the parents had a profound new appreciation for it, and actually began to work with teachers and schools better, and no longer always accusatory and pointing fingers saying, you're not looking after my son, you gave him the wrong grades and all of this stuff. It just works a lot better. So I just wanted to chip in with that. That's all.
That's okay. You know what? I honestly, I see views from both of you so well, and exactly what you just said there, Diamond. Also, I was a teacher for years as well, and when the lockdown happened, it kind of changed the perspective of parents, didn't it? So often, I mean, the amount of emails and calls I got from parents after saying, "Oh my God, I didn't even know how hard it was to look after your kid in school and teach." They're all, there we go now. But it was, but honestly, it was absolutely. I love those situations. Being able to still carry on teach them and inspire the kids even during lockdown. I loved it. But we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to quickly stop this link now and send a brand new link. We'll carry on in a moment. So just bear with me, guys. How about you, Saoirse? How did you cope with the whole lockdown situation? Were you okay?
Yeah, so I was actually in my final year of uni. So we were told we were going to lockdown in March. So they sent us all home. And then I had to do my finals in my little sister's bedroom because
really?
she had the strongest Wi-Fi connection. Yeah. So that was extremely surreal. It was okay. I mean, I think I was in a far better situation than a lot of people I know, especially people that had to go home and didn't have the workspace, didn't have the quiet space to do exams, and I had to send my parents out the house for 5-hour walks because at that point nothing was open. But I couldn't have them in the house because I was so anxious someone would be loud, or like because all my exams were timed online. It was so stressful. But no, it was a novel experience, and actually everything was okay in the end, but definitely wouldn't want to repeat that.
No, of course. I mean, that must be
probably would have preferred to have done it in person.
No, of course. I think most people would, wouldn't they? 'Cause I know that like family members of mine, friends who have family members who are younger as well. That transition going from say college or school or university, then going from say a building of hundreds, sometimes thousands of young people to then going home by yourself was such a surreal feeling. I mean, how did you find that transition going from being in university and being in your sister's bedroom to do all the work?
I'm such a social person, so I did struggle with it. I think lockdown for me was hard because I was desperate to be out with people, but I was very respectful of the rules. So it was all Zoom, FaceTime, discovering that whole new aspect of socializing. But no, like obviously I'm now used to, I mean, I'm so used to it now, I work remotely. But I like traditional seeing people in person. We will wash our hands, vaccinations, that kind of a thing. But no, definitely, I like the social part of things.
I bet. And for you, Sean, as well, how were you during the whole lockdown situation?
I think overall I was okay. Like during the first lockdown, I was at home. I think what helped me kind of get through was kind of playing a lot of basketball. So like I love basketball, it's like my favorite sport to play. So there's like a local court in my area. So for my like bit of exercise, I just go to my local court and play basketball. And because it was quite hot as well during lockdown, so it was just nice just to be outside in the sun and just play the sport that I enjoyed. So that kind of helped me get through the first lockdown. And then second lockdown, kind of was back at uni, so it was kind of locked down with my housemates. And yeah, that was okay. Like it was a bit weird sort of doing university while I was being in lockdown. Like that was very strange, and having to do online lectures and seminars and learning. But yeah, I don't know, that was alright. I think we all kind of we all get on well, so we all sort of kept everyone sane, and yeah, it was still quite it was alright. So yeah, I think like sort of compared to a lot of other people, my lockdown, like luckily was okay. So yeah, I got out of it. Like it was fine overall. And like I did love cooking, so I think I really took that time to get into cooking. And now
really?
I love cooking. Yeah, I love cooking a lot now. So yeah, overall it was okay for me.
That's brilliant, man. Like anything you like cooking in particular? Any signature dishes?
All cuisines, like I don't know, Asian, European, Caribbean. I like cooking all kinds of cuisines.
Yes, I love that. That's brilliant. And I know that obviously everyone's situation is a bit different. Some obviously at work, at university, or doing apprenticeships. But was there anything? And obviously, it was a shock for everyone completely especially when we first went into lockdown. I mean, was anything implemented in your areas to make sure that everyone was okay with your mental health? We'll start with actually, Jonas, I know you got to go quite soon, unfortunately, but I'll start with you. I mean, with your situation with like doing an apprenticeship at the time as well, was there anything implemented in place to help you with their mental health, where you could talk to someone, whether it's a psychologist or a teacher or someone above you, maybe?
No, not really. I was lucky because a year prior to lockdown, a couple of years prior, sorry. So when I left school in 2018, I just started doing loads of things with my life. So I returned to a mentoring organization that I used to go to. And because I was literally there every week, I was the first young person there every week in the morning, central London, doing a lot of stuff at the events that they had, all that kind of stuff. I was able to build quite good relationships with the mentors that they had there. So can't lie, during lockdown, I didn't really talk to them as much. But I think having that support network that I knew I could go to if something was up was good and beneficial. Like, I don't have any siblings. It's just me and my mom at home. So unlike other people, I don't have like two parents. I don't have a father figure. I don't have siblings to really get advice from. But to be honest, I've always also been the type of guy that if I was struggling with something, I'd literally, or needed to learn a skill or needed to learn a recipe, I'd go on YouTube or I'd go on Google. Google is basically my best friend. So, and if I needed an actual human to talk to, I'd talk to one of the mentors there. So I think for me, I was lucky enough to have built that prior to lockdown, because I think if I went into lockdown, say what that time 2 years ago when I was in year 11, all I would be doing all day is playing FIFA, firstly, and I'd probably really want to play basketball as well, because that's one of my hobbies as well. And I was obsessed with basketball when I was in secondary school. I still am, to be honest, but I don't play as much. But I think I didn't have that support network back then. It would mainly be my head teacher, but I can't really chat to my head teacher like that because of safeguarding. But I think because I built those relationships over time and I went out there to do that rather than sitting at home for the last 2 years, from 2018 to 2020, I was able to build that. So quite fortunate in that sense, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how about you, Penelope, as well?
I think for context, the secondary school and sixth form that I attended in the period of lockdown is currently in special measures for failing to safeguard their children. So it goes without saying that I had virtually no support from teachers, mental staff, anything like that. But like I said earlier, the formative years of my life were essentially spent by myself, whether that be in hospital or elsewhere. So I was already kind of habituated, although I shouldn't be, and I'm currently going to therapy for it to help me deal with it now. But I was habituated to that kind of do it yourself because nobody's going to do it for you. It's something that as a disabled woman, you're taught from a very, very young age, especially if you are disabled from birth, because unfortunately it is true. So I guess the only kind of ways that I had to deal with my mental health were indirect, not because I wanted that, but because it was the only, route available to me. And even though these things that I used to deal with my mental health indirectly were helpful, my best friend and I, we set a date every week. Every Friday night we would watch the same Netflix movie and we'd text each other our thoughts right as we were watching it. So it would be like we were sat in the same room, and I'd arrange times to play video games with other friends, which is something that as much as I agree with Jonas, you shouldn't be playing FIFA all day when the kind of when you have no viable option for physical interaction. Video games can for a certain amount of time replace that. And although, like I said, those were indirect, and I'm now currently in therapy to deal with the issues that I have, which is something that if it's accessible to you, or if you know a mental health charity that you would fit under the remit of, I would highly recommend. I feel like although I would have really, really benefited from that kind of support that schools are supposed to provide, I feel like given the limited resources I had at the time, I did as best a job as I could that I'm now working to fix.
For sure. I mean, for me personally as well, I know that a few people that have gone to therapy over the last sort of few years of my life, and do you feel like a whole weight has been lifted off your shoulders now, like because you're able to talk to someone now and get the help that you need and deserve?
I think that for a lot of people, therapy is it's scary, and I completely understand that. Especially from a completely non-disabled perspective, I can imagine for a lot of people accepting that they do need constant medical help in their life is difficult. But for me, I guess my physical disability has brought me an advantage in some sense. I'm used to being around doctors. I'm used to kind of having that interaction. So therapy itself never brought an additional weight. The idea that I get to talk to somebody now is absolutely wonderful. I think there is such a stigma around going to therapy because it's typically reserved. We reserve it in our mindsets for people who, you know, are almost past the point of return. But in reality, I think, and I'm aware that it's not accessible to anybody. Everybody, like I said, it's just become accessible to me. I think a lot of people, the majority of people in our society, could genuinely benefit from even just having that a few sessions to, you know, kind of work out the issues that they have in their life, whether that be long term or short term. I feel like there is such a stigmatization around therapy, and I feel like genuinely therapy it's like Diamond said at the beginning of the podcast, it's a way for me to invest in myself and invest in what I want to do.
For sure. And if it makes you a better person, it helps you mentally, physically as well, then you should get the help that you need, actually. And I know this might sound a bit silly as well, but for me, when I started my podcast a few years ago, even before lockdown happened, in a way that was kind of like my therapy as well, because I was sharing stories of what I had to go through to get to where I was in life. I'm dyspraxic myself, so I found a lot of school and life very difficult because of the way I spoke, my memory, coordination. Those kind of things were really, really difficult for me. But when I spoke to people about it and got off my chest, for me, it felt like a whole massive weight was lifted off my shoulders. I mean, for you, Diamond, as well, was there anything put in place for you to talk to someone or get help that you needed during lockdown and even afterwards?
I mean, personally, I mean, this might sound like I know I'm sounding like I'm riding on the waves or on the clouds, but I actually have a very good support network. Regardless of COVID. So there's always been people to speak to. There's always been people that I can go to and say, listen, I'm going through a hard time with this. So when COVID came, it wasn't really that much of a difference. In fact, it just solidified all of the networks and the friendships that had been established. And it was even greater because then we were able to reach out to people as well. And so one thing that I recognized in that time is that my school, which is where I work, they did make a great effort to support both the staff and the students, which I think is phenomenal. And as a result, it was like you said, it was a form of investment that actually yielded great results in the long run because students still did well in their exams, and some of them came up with a positive mindset and stuff as well. And even to this day, the school still does offer services in regards to getting counselling, health and well-being. One thing that I found was really, really good and really touching for the students is that they had vulnerable school, which obviously, you know, you just kind of deem of, oh, this person's vulnerable because of health and stuff like that, like Penelope was saying, they kind of class people. But what was quite inspiring is that they said, you know what, vulnerability is not just in terms of outlook, it's actually in terms of the state of your mind. And so a lot of students were there that there were some students that were like SENB and different things, but there were a large majority of the students were people that had issues just at home. And I think that being able to recognize that as an area of vulnerability was absolutely fantastic. I was called in to kind of facilitate and supervise some of the students that were there. And it just made me really happy. There was one particular student who obviously lockdown kind of caused a bit of rift in some families. And she was now able to witness firsthand how unhappy her parents were. And obviously there was a lot of arguing and stuff in the house. And so she wasn't able to complete her coursework very well. And we noticed a difference in her behavior, so we told her to come in. And even though she didn't want to, because everybody kind of wanted to be at home and living their best life as well, she did, and she made the effort to actually, you know, get out of that space and you know, push to actually working towards fulfilling her grade. And I think that's such a massive step to recognize, hey, I need help beyond the normal measure. I need help beyond the measure I've even needed help before. And taking that bold step to say, look, I am vulnerable and this is how I want to solve it. So I feel like that was quite good. And I also feel like it was a space where communities come together. So my church really capitalized and pushed for people to be united. We launched our online platform at that time, and it was just amazing. People felt engaged, people felt loved, people felt they had another community. So when we did open up again, they were able to come and meet us in real life. And so support measures were kind of put in place all around the board. So it's kind of like my sphere or my space was guarded all around, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I said it was a really good time for me, because I was able to grow with these people as well as with myself, if that makes sense.
Of course, 100%. And for you, Sean, as well?
Yeah, I don't know, there weren't things that were sort of specially put in place. I think because obviously I was at university for second lockdown. I think universities already have all of these services there available. So I guess that there was sort of more so just kind of promoting, letting students know that okay, we have services available to help with mental health. So yeah, I don't really recall anything kind of specifically that was put in place, but there was just a kind of like a support network there already. It was just kind of more widely promoted. Again, I think luckily, yeah, I think that living with like housemates and stuff, like we were all kind of there for each other. So I think, yeah, I really had like a good support network there, like fortunately. So from that aspect of things, I think I was like okay, because I had people I could sort of reach out to.
For sure. And for you, Saoirse, as well?
Yeah, very similar to Sean. It was more watching the experience of my younger sister, 'cause she was still in school. She was doing her in the AS year 12. It was quite frustrating actually, because her experience in comparison to some of my friends, other younger siblings, wasn't as great, because her school support just wasn't there, like online teaching and resources and stuff like that. There was so much discrepancy, I think, during that period. So in terms of support for me, everything was as pretty much what Sean said. But for young children at school, especially state schools where they don't perhaps have the money or the time to create resources, it was very clear that there were big discrepancies.
I mean, following what's happened over the last few years with COVID, do you think now that schools, or in fact the whole education system and work and so forth, will completely change the way they treat their students and their colleagues and so forth? Or do you think it will kind of stay fairly similar to what it already is at the moment?
Is that an open question, or is that
open question? Sorry, open question to
Oh,
everyone.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I obviously I work firsthand, so I'm pretty much on the forefront of seeing the impact that this has had for young people and for teachers alike. And I personally think that it sounds really bad, but I don't think anything's going to change. The reason why I say that is, number one, this generation has been impacted for a lifetime. We can see that a lot of people have reap the repercussions of it in one way or another, that maybe they do or do not want. We've seen a massive spike in social media activity and how people present themselves online, completely different to how they are in real life. And so people are taking comfort or pride or joy in being this online personality that is completely contrary to who they are. And as a result of that, there's identity crisis, there's lack of understanding of selves, and these all kind of build up and have a domino effect on how people thrive in life. So for example, and this might be a long shot, but there's a lot of young people that I've seen that have no zeal for education and no zeal to work. And you're like, how are you going to make money? How are you going to get up the ladder in life then? And they're pretty much content to try and be an influencer because influencers make money, or they want to try and what's the word? They only want to be an influencer, or unfortunately, some of them take to the street life and say, "Yeah, I'm going to do drugs," or looking for the fast money. The drive to be someone active in life has just completely shattered for a lot of people. And so as a result of that, because there was already that gap in the first place, I don't know if you get what I mean, like there was already that gap in the school system, it's just been widened. I don't see how there'll be any difference in the approach of that, because their gap was already there. If it was non-existent and then suddenly it was created, it would be like, oh my gosh, how do we manage it? How do we facilitate it? Because we already had a scope of students or scope of staff members that were already unable to facilitate these kind of things, or unwilling to actually recognize these things, it's just another gap that's been created. And obviously the awareness of it will help us to try and manage it, but to completely eradicate it or to manage it to zero, I don't think so.
That's okay. Penelope, you raised your hand.
Yes, is that all right? I've got something
Of
to say.
course.
I agree with everything that Diamond says, and I agree with her overall conclusion. I don't mean to sound like a cynic, but again, speaking from the disabled perspective, I've seen a lot of people at the beginning of the pandemic. Everybody was obviously all for kind of, you know, those Zoom lessons, that kind of online learning. And then maybe a few of them were, you know, pro blended learning. But as a disabled woman now who's, you know, looking for kind of, I'm just about to go into the final year of my bachelor's, and then I'm doing a 2-year master's, and you know, I see so many internships now. They've scrapped everything they've done, every kind of step of progress that they've made in terms of kind of the whole blended learning aspect or blended working. And as a disabled woman, I knew it was going to happen as soon as the majority of the population doesn't need something, like Diamond said, or doesn't notice something. It unfortunately, with the way funding currently works, with the way that teachers, I understand they're stretched beyond their limits. Nobody has scope to make that kind of change. It has to come from higher up, because again, it's just and I don't mean to badmouth teachers or educators, because I understand if you ask the majority of them, you know, they want to make change. They just don't have the kind of tenacity to be able to do it. Without going into specific details of what happened at my school to make it go into special measures, there was a senior member of staff who was dictating everything that those lower down had to do, to the point where my old science teacher launched a self-described coup to get him fired, and that's why we were put into special measures. So I understand that everybody would like change, but unless that is followed through from a higher perspective, we can do as many little things as we want, but that is not going to have the effect we want to.
Because exactly like you said, because from experience myself being a teacher for many years as well, is exactly like you said, they're so stretched out with so many different things to do, and things change all the time, and they can't always do what is needed, if that makes sense. I mean, it's people above them as well that always kind of force things or change things. So it's, as much as teachers want to help, and they do want to help you as well, it's something so difficult because of the workload is just ridiculous beyond belief. But for you, Saoirse, as well, how did you feel about the whole situation?
In terms of,
we'll go back to my original question. Sorry. But do you think things will change in the future since COVID happened, or stay relatively the same?
So I can sort of speak about it at a university level, because that was my most recent educational experience. I think it's drastically changed approaches to online learning. Now that it's become like a universal tool, I think it's something that will be utilized in good ways, because it now means we can do things like this, like we're doing right now. We can reach out to people from any location. It's way more convenient. And I think it also suits curriculums, in that you can perhaps speak about a bigger variety of things, because you have resources like Zoom, Teams, and that kind of thing.
For sure. And you, Sean, as well?
I think it's a tricky question. I suppose it just depends. Like, I think, like, I suppose like a big place where sort of we've seen more sort of permanent change kind of in the workplace, sort of working from home, and sort of how a lot more workplaces are flexible in terms of how they allow their people to work. But yeah, I think in education, it's it's hard to say. So I feel a little bit removed from education now, so I don't really know what schools or schools in particular are doing in terms of sort of still kind of like helping children and kind of being more accessible for different children. So from a school perspective, it's hard to say, but I think universities, I think there will be consistent change and improvements towards delivering education in a way that isn't just you have to be in person. So I think the sort of COVID lockdown changes that are made in university, I think kind of have and will continue. But with schools, it's been more difficult for me to say.
I bet.